He celebrated that animal welfare had become centre stage in the Conservative Party, and how pleased he was. He was absolutely delighted that there were so many new Conservative MPs who were leading on this important issue. David was instrumental in making this happen. Throughout his time as an MP, he consistently pushed for animal welfare legislation, at times when this was far less popular than it is today. Indeed, during his long career in the Commons, nearly 40 years, he chose never to hold a ministerial position, instead devoting his time to the causes and campaigns he felt passionately about. His dedication to these causes and campaigns would later be a marker of his time in Parliament and led to him to receive several awards during his political career. Now, David led countless animal welfare campaigns in Parliament as an MP. He introduced the Protection Against Cruel Tethering Act to help protect vulnerable horses, and sponsored the Horses and Ponies Bill, the Pet Animals Bill, and also sponsored the Responsible Pet Ownership Show for MPs and peers, and introduced a 10-minute rule bill, the Pig Husbandry Farrowing Bill. And he later defied our own party leadership to vote for the fox hunting ban, and was vocal on protecting this law when it was under the threat of repeal many years ago. And David was also a strong voice to end trophy hunting imports, and led an early day motion in Parliament to end these imports. We look forward to hearing more on this issue later by Sir Ranulph Fiennes. Now, in more recent years, as our patron, he campaigned for a live animal export ban, and could often be seen at rallies and events to end this cruel practice, which subjects animals to long, stressful journeys abroad. We hope this bill will soon be banned in the Kept Animals Bill, which we hope will soon return to Parliament as soon as possible. It is something David worked to achieve for decades. He also spent years campaigning for mandatory animal welfare labelling, something which is now progressing, we hope, following the government's call for evidence. But one of the most significant campaigns close to David's heart was to ban the use of pig farrowing crates. Last year, he led a 10-minute rule bill, the Pig Husbandry Farrowing Bill, to end these cruel farrowing crates for sows. It would be an everlasting tribute to ensure David's bill becomes law, and this is something we, Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation, and many other animal welfare organisations will honour and campaign. Very soon, we will launch our new campaign, the Crate Escape, to end pig farrowing crates. As we celebrate animal welfare achievements over the last year, including the Animal Welfare Sentience Act and the Glue Traps Offences Act, led by our host James Stevenson MP, we cannot help but be saddened that David's not here to celebrate these milestones with us. I remember a time at our patron Elise Dunweber's house when Sir David was struck by the life-size knight in armour in her hallway, and David absolutely loved this.
Big house.
And Elise later bought him a small knight statue as a Christmas present. But sadly, David never lived to receive this. So this statue is now in our office and reminds us of Sir David as a protector, a shining star, a knight who worked tirelessly for the causes close to his heart. In the year since his death, we miss him as much as ever. His kindness, compassion, and optimism continue to be missed by his family, friends, and constituents. We miss his huge smile and the great sense of humour. He always made us laugh and was such fun to be with. We feel incredibly thankful for his years he spent as our patron. David will always be a huge inspiration for us and will always be remembered in our hearts. Thank you.
It is a huge pleasure to be here tonight. Last year in Manchester, I spoke about my glue traps bill, and Sir David spoke about Beatrice's bill for hen caging, and we chatted the night away at the side of the event, and David greeted my glue trap bill with the same enthusiasm that he did for so many causes that were close to his heart. I was elected in 2019, so sadly I didn't have the pleasure of knowing David for so long, but he was one of the first sort of senior people I met. I arrived at the fire safety APPG in Parliament and didn't quite know what an APPG did, but I had spent time in a fire station I'd had as a councillor in my ward, so I decided that was probably a good one to go to. And David, it will be of no surprise to anyone who knew him, greeted me with enormous warmth and took time to make sure I was heard, thanked me for contributing. He was so encouraging, so delightful and so welcoming to all of the 2019 intake. When I discovered he was also an animal nut, and I'm a little bit pro-animals if anyone knows me, but we shared that great passion as so many colleagues and so many people in our party do, and certainly in my constituency it unites all political colours. This is not a political issue, it is a welfare issue, and it is one of being decent human beings. And David surely is one of the most decent human beings ever. It is a massive, massive loss to our parliamentary party, to his constituency. We're going to be hearing from Anna from Southend in a little while. It is odd to stand here, and I know many people, I see colleagues who aren't going to speak, but who've come because they wanted to attend and pay tribute and remember Sir David and everything he did. But I think it must also be a celebration of such a magnificent person who did so much for everybody.
For coming to this important event, not just to support the very important work that the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation do, but also to pay tribute to my great friend Sir David Amess, who was passionately committed to the cause of animal welfare, but also had great empathy with human beings too. He had a very high IQ, he had an exceptionally high EQ. He had that great God-given gift for being able to tune in with someone literally within a few minutes of meeting them and to empathise with whatever their concerns were. But he also had a funny side to him too, and it's on that I want to pay my tribute in that moment. Look, he always wanted to win the Parliamentary Dog of the Year, right? And he entered time and time again, and would always come back from the contest and say, "It's rigged." And yet he entered his Frenchman Vivian, and when he was asked, why should people vote for your dog as opposed to any other, he replied, because Vivian wants Southend to become a city. Which of course it now is. And it would not have become a city. So that tribute lives on forever. By the way, I asked him once, or asked a friend, why did he call the dog Vivian? And the answer was he named Vivian after Julia Roberts' character in Pretty Woman. So only my mate Amess could name a dog after a hooker, right? And he always could see the funny side of life. Now, I'm a former accommodation worker in the House of Commons, and as well as David caring passionately about practice what he preached. And we have our good friend Simon Denman here from the BBC. But if your camera could just malfunction for the next 30 seconds, please, because as you all know, he cared greatly about horses. We mentioned the cruel tethering act, and any MP here will tell you it's not easy to get a private member's bill through the House of Commons. He managed two, of which that was one. He was immensely proud to be knighted by the late Her Majesty the Queen. And a couple of months later, it was the Southend civic reception, at which members of Parliament are often invited to attend. What does Amess do? He gets hold of someone who runs a horse sanctuary to lend him a tame horse. Goes to a theatrical costumier, gets a lightweight suit of armour. And on the appointed evening, he comes trotting up the gravel drive to the Porters, which is Southend's version of the Guildhall, on this horse, dressed in a suit of armour. And there's the mayoral driver out polishing the mayoral limo. And he looks up at him and said, "Mr. Amess, what do you think you're doing?" To which David replied, "I'm a knight." Somehow managed to dismount, said to this guy, "Hold my horse, will you?" Walks into the reception, picks up his glass of warm Chardonnay and his canapes, and away he goes as if nothing had ever happened. This was the man I knew. I never had a boring day in his company, because you never quite knew what he was going to do next. He was passionate about many things. He was a passionate monarchist. But he was particularly passionate about animal welfare. So he was rightfully the patron of this wonderful organisation. We have lost a champion. We have not lost his legacy and his faith. And I deputise all of you tonight to continue and support the cause for which he believed. I said in my tribute to him in the House of Commons, he was the best bloke I ever knew. That is absolutely true. Thank you for coming here tonight to support this cause and to honour his memory. Certainly amongst all of us, and in particular his parliamentary colleagues, and I know Chris and Lorraine, it is deeply, deeply appreciated. Thank you so much, and you're going to hear in a minute from his very worthy successor, Firth, but from the bloke in the constituency next door. Thank you so much for coming. He really was the best man I ever knew.
And to Sir David, I'm sure you'll agree, it's a very, very fitting tribute to Sir David. And it's also a reminder, I think, to all of us that however good or entertaining we might think that our speeches are tonight, none of them will be as good as the one that Sir David would have given if he was here himself. I've looked and listened to a few of these speeches, and they were full on Sir David at these events. Now, some of my team didn't feel up to coming this evening, so they've given me some stories to tell. So I have got a few pieces of paper, so please bear with me. But we've already heard about David being an absolutely great animal lover and about his menagerie that Mark took over. But at its height, there were actually 6 aquariums, 7 birds, 2 turtles, and a crab. And it was a surprise to me on my very first day in Westminster to discover as a new Member of Parliament that I was also the proud owner of an African cichlid, known more commonly to people like myself as a large goldfish, called Norman, inherited from Sir David. And when we moved from Sir David's wonderful room to my very, very tiny rabbit hutch, there was no way that Jill, my office manager, was going to be separated from Norman. And Mark put up quite a spirited attempt to try and kidnap Norman. It came to nothing. But there was one animal in the Palace of Westminster that David struggled with, and that was the many palace mice. Palace, as you know, is overrun with mice, and David fought a constant battle of wits against them in his office. And according to Jill, one day they were interviewing a very lovely, polite young lady for a position in his office. She very stoically put up with having to shout over the combined shrieks of the canaries, the budgies and the lovebirds. But at one point her eyes glazed over and she said tentatively, "Is there supposed to be a mouse on your desk?" Sure enough, sitting bold as brass on Sir David's desk was a little brown mouse. David and Jill shot out of their seats, yelling at each other, "Catch it!" But it made its escape through the air conditioning duct. And David was most aggrieved because it had already managed to eat through half of a stick of rock, saving for himself. But it's obviously for David's amazing work to improve animal rights that I believe he would most want to be remembered. And it is worth reflecting that when David joined Parliament, he was one of only 4 Conservative MPs opposed to fox hunting. There were more giant pandas in Europe than there were Conservative MPs against fox hunting. And of course there are now hundreds. And I do believe that a lot of this sea change in attitudes to animals and to animal welfare must be credited to Sir David, and also to Lorraine and Chris and the wonderful Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation. Sir David was quite simply a colossus when it came to standing up for animals. As we've heard, he led so many campaigns during his long year in Parliament. From sponsoring the Horses and Ponies Bill in 1984 that we've already heard about, the Pet Animals Bill in 1990, Protection Against Cruel Tethering in 1988, and the Hen Caging and Prohibition Bill in 2021, only last year. For 40 years, Sir David was animals' grand protector in Parliament. But for last October's tragic events, there is no doubt that Sir David would have continued this amazing work. And some of you will know that his final contribution in the House of Commons, almost exactly a year ago, was for a debate to commemorate World Animal Day last year. So he would be absolutely delighted to see all of you here to celebrate World Animal Day 2021 and to see the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation continuing his amazing work. I'm very proud to take on his legacy. I myself am a big animal lover, and I know that there are 2 issues that Sir David in particular would want us to carry on his work. The first is pig farrowing crates. In the words of Sir David himself last year, while confined in farrowing crates, these sensitive, and this is not always understood, intelligent animals are completely unable to express many of their natural behaviours. I mean, this is disgusting, frankly, and we really have to do something about it. We know that many countries have already outlawed this practice, but they're still used by 60% of herds in the UK. 200,000 pigs a year are still confined in these cruel and tiny crates. So I will very much be joining the campaign for the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation to call for these to be banned once and for all. And the second thing that I know Sir David would want me to mention this evening is the export of live animals. This is a barbaric practice that Sir David stood up against for many, many years, talking about the stress and the suffering of animals, many of whom are overcrowded, underventilated, some of them even dying in transit with this cruel way of transporting them. So, and we mustn't forget, ending live animal exports is a manifesto commitment. And so I know there are rumours that banning the export of live animals, except for fattening and slaughter, might have to be excluded from the Kept Animals Bill, but we must keep up the work to ensure that in due course this practice is banned once and for all. So I'd like to conclude by thanking one person in particular, and that is you, Lorraine, on David's behalf. By setting up the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation, you have changed the Conservative perception of the issue of animal rights. Down to you and this organisation that animals made their way into the Conservative Party manifesto in 2019 for the very, very first time. You have ensured that now we as a party are now on the right side of the argument when it comes to so many of these issues. You have been David's heroes. And on his behalf, all I can say is thank you so much.
The fact that one needs to look after vulnerable sentient beings that can't look after themselves. And when I first arrived in Parliament, I'd had a bit of a track record on animal welfare in the European Parliament where I served previously, and it was to David I was sent, and I ever after took his advice, and I pledge to you that I will continue the fight for those measures which are in our manifesto, which he championed, whether it's live exports or banning trophy hunted, banning the import of trophies hunted from endangered animals. And I want to see progress on the ban of enriched cages. There's all sorts of incredible causes for which he was a champion and which we must champion in his name. And yes. I just want to leave you with one thought about, again, illustrating what a sweet person he was. Because the last time, I want to talk about the last letter I received from Sir David. Because actually that was in the summer of 2021 when I'd had a bit of a brush with the House of Commons Standards Commissioner. As some of us do, nothing too serious, I hasten to add. But usually with your colleagues who are, embroiled in a standards complaint, you kind of steer well clear and you don't mention it. But having got through the process, and I got a letter afterwards from David saying how unfairly he thought I'd been treated, and that it was an entirely disproportionate reaction. And I thought, what an incredibly kind thing to do. All MPs are busy. He had so many causes to champion, and he took the time to send me that kind letter at a time when I felt very much alone and unhappy as a result of what happened. So he was a great, great, great man, and I think it's wonderful that you are all here to remember his wonderful achievements. Thank you.
Well done.